what I think is very interesting is the way how society looks at you and the view that you may have on yourself, right? So when I think about the way how society views myself, it's this sort of polished individual, right? This individual who is a hedge fund manager on Wall Street, an Ivy Leaguer, a person who has been featured on Forbes, Business Insider, Reuters, CNBC, all these sorts of accolades, right? But the interesting thing is that when I look at myself, I see myself as a group of individuals that I would categorize as the broken, right? And the broken is not a race thing, right? So what exactly is the broken? The broken is the mentality that you develop from being a part of a certain socioeconomic status, right? So here's the thing. When I grew up a very poor individual. I'm talking about low-income housing area, EBT cards, a broken family, and really an area that really shot down dreams, right? In order for you to really understand where I'm coming from, you really have to feel this sort of talk, right? There were things that I went through in my life as a younger boy that really shaped my perception on society, right? So I want to walk you guys through a story about my mother and I when I was a young boy. I remember my mother was getting ready to go to Payless, and she was cutting out these coupons, right? So this is around the early 2000 time when shoes were about $15, $20, right? Something around that base. The interesting thing is that my mother had waited weeks to really make this trip. So we made the trip, we went to Payless, and unfortunately, what ended up happening was they didn't honor the coupon, all right? So we walked out, and I could tell that my mother was very distraught and in a way embarrassed. But the thing about this story is that it really stuck with me, and in a way it traumatized me. But the way how it traumatized me was very different than how it would impact others. You see, I went through this, and I took something like this, and I really dwelled on it. And I would use this sort of story somewhat as motivation during the tough times in my life, right? I remember being a college student and really having this different attitude towards something that nobody would even care of. Like, I remember looking at an individual that had a laptop, and I felt deprived. I said, why is it that this person would have a laptop and I didn't have the means to afford a laptop? I felt like the basic necessity to complete an education I didn't even have the groundwork for, right? I would see kids pretty much going to the courier, and they would have their parents with them to pay their student debt. I didn't even really conceptualize what that truly meant, right? So here's the thing. The broken is a type of individual that is naturally resilient, right? And this isn't a thing about me. There are thousands of kids that are out there that have this same ability, right? But the difference is that the opportunities that these children have are scarce, right? So myself, I was fortunate enough, I would consider it blessed, to have certain opportunities in my life that really made things different. So when you peel back the layers and you look at these sort of socioeconomically deprived areas, what you end up realizing is that there is a lot of talent that exists in these areas, not only from an artistic standpoint, not only an athletic standpoint, but also an academic standpoint. So when you think about why there's this type of cyclical gridlock that goes on in America, it's very important to understand the root of it, right? When you think about the way how society sources talent, it's a very poor way of sourcing talent, right? We're all looking for the next Steve Jobs. We are all looking for the next icon. But it's really in this cookie cutter approach where you have an individual or a group of individuals that may say, hey, take an aptitude test, take a psychology test, take an IQ test. What you end up getting is this very basic sort of demographic that comes through the cookie cutter, right? But when you think about the individuals that are part of the broken, they have already demonstrated resiliency, right? There is a sense that, we already understand that, oh yeah, the person is resilient, but as a society, we don't truly embrace that, right? And there's no doubt that not everybody who is part of this socioeconomically deprived areas are part of the broken. Absolutely, there's no doubt that that's true. But there are ways to tell if a person really is able to take the extreme disadvantages that they may have and use them to their advantage, right? So let me walk you guys through an example here. It's very common to think that, okay, a person who is on an airplane with a crying baby for 4 hours, it's going to be well accepted that, yeah, they're probably going to be aggravated, right? But what about the young girl who goes home at night and she has to endure 4.5 hours of her mother getting abused? And then she has to wake up the next day and she may not have breakfast and she has to perform in school and she may do something athletically. So then there's physical activity that goes on after. There is something very different about the type of individual that could naturally sustain a lifestyle like that, right? So when you think about the opportunities and the advantages these type of individuals have, it's often misconstrued that, well, society is doing something where they could really embrace this individual, right? You have a lot of these minority programs and really these type of programs that will excel people that are in deprived areas. However, that is very, very, very far from the truth, right? A lot of this in corporate America is actually window dressing. And it's unfortunate to see that, especially because culturally America has come so far. But here's what I'm going to say to you. Because as thought leaders and as business owners, it is really our job to provide the resources for this type of individual, right? It is our job to help excel this type of individual in a certain capacity. Now, the interesting thing about sourcing talent, specifically like this, is that you don't necessarily need to test for it because naturally, life has tested this individual already. Life has given you the blueprint to show that this individual is resilient. So here's what I challenge you today. When you are looking, this is for all the business owners and all the thought leaders that are out there. When you are looking to hire talent, focus on one thing and one thing only. The next time that you go through the process, instead of the aptitude exams and instead of the personality tests, focus on one thing. Focus on if the individual has a PhD. Poor, hungry, and determined. And watch how that will transform your business.